Rotary Fund Board. Paul plus 3, one of the best time presidents we've ever had.
Please take the tradition, posture of your tradition. Creator and sustainer God, we celebrate a world this close to having polio eliminated. We ask for a blessing on the causes that Rotary supports, promoting peace, fighting disease, providing clean water, saving mothers and children, supporting education, growing local economies, and protecting the environment. Louisvillian Muhammad Ali said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for the room here on earth." As we employ our motto of service above self, we remain hopeful that all the work we do in service to others will make our world a better place. Help us to be mindful and aware of the needs of others. We thank you for our friends and family. We thank you for our club. We thank you for our lunch today and the folks who prepared it. Please be with our speaker, Rob Gibbons, as he speaks about conflicts in the world. Please keep all our servicemen and women in your care, and all of God's people say, Amen.
Thanks, Walt. Now leads the pledge and four-way test is Jay Mallory, Executive VP of Marketing and Business Development at Image Quest, Club Director, Co-Chair of the Membership Development Engagement Committee, and Paul Harris Fellow.
Please join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the four-way test.
Is true, is fair to all concerned, will build goodwill and better friendships, will be beneficial to all concerned. Now today we have a special privilege. Michael Merritt is going to sing a couple of songs to us. The national anthem and also my old Kentucky Hill song. And we're going to split these up. One was right at the end, one was now. But since Michael has a microeconomics exam at 1 o'clock, we decided to have him do both at the same time. Let me give you a little background on Michael. Come on up, Michael. He's a senior at U of L majoring in music with a minor in entrepreneurship. Maybe he'll be a rock musician or something like that. That's busy. That's business. He's a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha and holds one of the fraternity's aims, which is love for all mankind. He holds that close to the heart. He's the leader of this community and enjoys making it a better and more prosperous place, especially for the youth, as executive director for the organization Future Healers, that focuses on mentoring children. He's a songwriter, performer, lessons teacher for piano and voice, app developer, and a marketing manager. Please come up and lead us in the national anthem, anyways.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs burst
Okay, well, I am delighted, President Kevin and friends, to introduce my son, David Schmidt, who works in industrial engineering with UPS and is my guest today.
I have two guests here, both former speakers here at the Rotary Club. Barry Dunn, President and CEO, Co-chair for Kids, spoke here last year. And Bill Lamb, former member for 15 years or so, speaker here, former general manager at WDRB, and 5 years in LA as a GM, and most recently a columnist for the Courier-Journal. So, welcome.
President Kevin, I'd like to introduce my wife, Karen Chatham.
President Kevin and fellow Rotarians and honored distinguished guests and visitors, I'd like to introduce my guest, Miss Stephanie Billups. Stephanie's a young woman that I met a number of years ago in our beloved West Louisville Girls Choir. Today, she serves in our military as an Army reservist. She works through the midnight shift at Waffle House. And she also works a part-time job at UPS, and wait, there's more, she's attending the University of Louisville. Please give it up for Stephanie.
Well, yes, and after lunch, you just go to that table over there, what is Rotary? And Rick Hardy can tell you a little bit about our club, what's involved.
President Kevin.
Somebody calling me? Yes, oh, no.
I have two, Delene Taylor, Executive Director of the club. I have two guests to introduce today. One is Davy Palmer, who is a fellow member with me of the Women's Club of Louisville. Welcome, Davy. And she brought with her retired neurosurgeon from Salt Lake City, Dr. Will Owen. Welcome.
We have two Rotarians in the spotlight this week. Dr. Carl Kim recently traveled to Guatemala with a team of veteran surgeons, anesthesia staff, and nurses on a life-changing mission. They performed 43 surgeries in just 5 days. Think about that. Providing corrective procedures for children and neglected adults with congenital deformities. Think of that, 43 people in 5 days. Think of how their lives and the lives of their loved ones were changed because of that. Denise Sears and SOS provided a free wheelchair clinic for those living with partial paralysis and other disabilities. They brought their standard electric wheelchairs and had them repaired, cleaned, or even replaced on the spot. Denise said the turnout was larger than expected, and they ended up helping dozens of people in a matter of hours. Thank you. More examples of service above self, many more. This week is World Immunization Week. Remember, you can support Polio Plus through our district's Purple Pinky Bourbon charity by buying a bottle of bourbon. We need a few more volunteers to join us the next 2 Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. at the West End School to read with the 8th grade boys. Please contact Paul Kudo to sign up. You'll be glad you did. It's quite an experience. And by the way, was it yesterday? They just did a grand opening, groundbreaking for the girls' school. So it'll be a girls' West End School, different name, but same place. The Environmental Committee is looking for volunteers to help with the Ohio River cleanup, litter cleanup, event from 9 a.m. to noon on June 1st, that's a Saturday. Contact Alex Novak to sign up. We did that a few years ago, and it was fun event. If you're interested in potentially hosting an international student through our district's youth exchange program, please read more at Sparks or contact Rick Harden. And that's the student actually stays in your home for a period of months. And thanks to the Social Action Committee, we're planning a group trip to Tuscany, Italy in November. Full details in Sparks, or you can contact Kent Oyler. Organize that trip and just organize the G Appliance Tour. He's a pretty active guy here. You might have noticed a new feature in Sparks this week. We have a door prize to give away. And all you have to do to be entered to win is find the clue in Sparks. Something's hidden in it, some mistake in it. This week the prize is 2 tickets to JFCS Mosaic Awards. And if you haven't been to that, that's a very impressive event. It's basically the first either new immigrant or first generation, in other words, child of a new immigrant, the impact they made on the community, the difference they made in our city. And I've been there 2 or 3 times, and I'll tell you, they have some amazing stories. very inspirational. It's worth definitely worth my time. I want to remember the new member initiative. We have the opportunity to have lunch here covered for prospective Rotarian you bring as a guest. And you see, people in the community, leaders in the community out there being recognized. Make sure they know about our club and invite them for lunch. And I'd like to, I'll invite Julie to the podium in a second. I want to just mention, Rob, basically, I noticed he's got a lot of groupies here today, which is good. Sitting there before lunch, before the program, everybody's coming up. He's got a lot of people here that are his fans. One of them is actually, I guess, another talk he gave us a few days ago. But Rob's been involved in all kinds of stuff. I'll let Julie do the introduction. He's quite a person I really feel. He's just as good as me. So Julie Schmidt, Senior Director of External Affairs at KET. She's a Paul Hammond Fellow plus one, and also one of the best darn presidents ever. Introduced today's speaker.
Yes, I agree. We're really excited to have our guest speaker, Kevin. Having grown up on Air Force bases across America, I'm particularly honored to have this opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, retired Brigadier General Rob Gibbons. His talk is titled, "A World at War, How Does It All End and What Does It Mean to You?" You may recognize Rob, host of Thunder Over Louisville Air Show for the last 10 years, including this past Saturday on WDRB. He's the son of an Air Force veteran, and his interest in planes and military history began at a very early age. As a young boy, he built model planes and dreamed of flying one day. And so he did. A graduate of Jefferson County Public Schools, Rob was selected to attend the Air Force Academy, and he soared. Had a distinguished 27-year career in the United States Air Force, retiring in 2013 as Brigadier General. As you can imagine, he has an extensive bio that was included in Sparks, and for the sake of time, I'll just highlight a couple of items. His impressive career includes flying as the right wing for the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds. Woo-hoo! There's nothing better. And a command pilot flying the F-16 and A-10. Rob is a combat veteran in Desert Storm, Enduring Freedom, and Iraqi Freedom, and twice decorated with the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism in active action against Iraq. In addition, he served as commander of several squadrons and operations. As a special assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Deputy Assistant Chief of Staff for Operations of U.S. Forces Korea, General Gibbons gained valuable experience of the national security process. In his final deployment, he was responsible for day-to-day combat air operations in the Middle East as Director, Combined Air and Space Operations Centers, U.S. Air Force's Central Command, Southwest Asia. Upon his retirement, Rob returned to Louisville, to home, and enjoys visiting his farm in Butler County, where he and his family have had land for generations, going back to the Revolutionary War. General, thank you for your service, and please give a warm Rotary welcome to U.S. Air Force General Rob Gibbons.
Can everybody hear me? Is my microphone working okay?
Yes.
So groupies, Kevin, really? The great thing about having groupies, I suppose, is that it gives a little bit of self-actualization, which is awesome. But the bad thing is they know how fictional that bio really is. So yeah, I'll just do the best I can today. First, thank you all for the opportunity to come address the group. I've had a chance to attend Rotaries before with my current boss, Senator Paul. For those of you who don't know him, for the hardcore Democrats in the room, sorry, you've got a Republican in front of you. That's right, I know Neville and I know Gil, so I got this record. And I'm a huge fan of Barbara, so there's that. Don't tell my boss that, please. But it's an honor to be able to come to speak to this group, and primarily it's an honor because, unfortunately, as Louisvillians here in the center of the country, we don't often spend a lot of time talking about foreign policy. Who's a member of the Louisville Forum and attends Louisville Forum? Okay, there's a problem. I've been trying to get the Louisville Forum to do a foreign policy topic for at least 10 years. And this is the answer I always get back. I mean, they're very gracious, right? And the answer back always is, you know, we deal with local issues. That doesn't really matter to us. I know, I'm slamming them. It's great. Please feel free to tell them. I thought I didn't when Iris was there, but it didn't work. But this matters to all of us. And it matters to all of us because beyond our city and our state and our region and our country, these are things that could definitely, instantly, within a 30-minute time of flight from a silo somewhere in Siberia, change our way of life forever. And we don't give it the due it needs. For example, anybody from KET here? Yeah. Is there anybody from KET? Yeah. In the debate, now she knows this, I mentioned this, but in the debate between Stuart Ray and Morgan McGarvey for their congressional seat, out of the 2-hour debate, there were 0 questions on foreign policy. And these are the people, regardless of whoever won, that would vote on whether or not we go to war. I mean, if we ever get back to where Congress actually votes on war or not. These are things we need to know. So I would like to tell you that in the lighthearted nature that I am bringing at the moment to the podium, that I've got nothing but great news to tell you. I don't. The only good news I can share of the whole presentation is that the executive director of the Louisville Zoo is here, and he and I share a common fascination with the polar bear, although I hate to let him know that that bear likes me better than him. So I don't have great news, right? But the news that I have is that we need to be more thoughtful. I'm going to try and go through, I've been given 20 minutes, and giving a fighter pilot the microphone in 20 minutes is a fantasy. But I'll try my best to get through the time quickly. Did we just score? You got to be a U of L fan to hear that, right? We got to get through some of this because I want to be able to allow questions that come through. But it's a difficult topic because I am a product of, I entered the military right as the Cold War was ending. So I still thought of the Russians as the enemy. Still do. But then we went to the 90s, when everything was great, right? A historian named Fenton Fukuyama wrote a book called The End of History, and it was over. Liberal democracy and globalization was going to reign supreme, and we were just a year or two away from Star Trek. All that's gone. It's all gone. And we are in a position now where the potential for great power conflict is significant. And the United States needs to learn, again, how to operate in that environment. And it boils down to some very basic things. And the first thing really is that understanding we are a world at war, but then understanding that the realities of the military situation today are not the realities of the military situation in the late 90s or the early 2000s. And that will impact the way in which we can conduct foreign policy. And then once we realize that, we have to decide as a people, as a country, who we are going to be in that regard. So, first disclaimer. I'm not here to represent the views of my boss. In the question and answer period, if you have a question about his views, I'm more than happy to answer those. What you will find probably, however, is that we are very aligned on these issues. And it might come as a surprise to some of you that see somebody who's a career military officer that thinks that, but I can explain why. And so, fighter pilots normally like to talk about themselves, right? So, if you've ever dated a fighter pilot, the date's half over when they say, okay, enough about me, let's talk about flying. And I don't like to do this necessarily, but I just want to establish some level of credibility, hopefully, with you all. And then that's based off of, I've had the opportunity to see this process at a pretty significant level. As a special assistant to Admiral Mullen when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I was in his office the day the executive officer ran in and said, "Admiral, you got to take this call." And it was his Russian counterpart saying that they had invaded Georgia. I was in Korea the day the North Koreans shelled Waipido Island and killed two South Korean Marines and 2 civilians, and the South Koreans shot back and killed 5 North Korean artillery. And we sat underground for 30 days waiting to go to war with North Korea. You guys might have missed that in 2010, but we were inches away. We were an artillery shell away from general war with North Korea. So I've been around the block a little bit. I've fought war 3 times. First time as an A-10 pilot in the first Gulf War. I am actually that old, although I was only 10 when I flew that airplane. And then again in the invasion of Iraq in 2003, flying F-16s during the first part of the war, the second war with Iraq. And then my last combat sortie, strangely enough, was in a B-1 bomber over Afghanistan in a war that absolutely no longer made any sense by 2012. At least we got out a decade later. So, where are we? We're a world at war. We're all familiar with the Russia-Ukraine war. Apparently it's still going on. In case you haven't been watching the news for the past week, it's all in the news these days. I guarantee you we won't be talking about it again in another couple of weeks because we're Americans and we have an attention span of ferrets. And the war's been going on for 2 years. Oh, wait, there's a Gaza war, right? The Israelis and the Palestinians are at war with each other, if we call it war any longer, and that's continuing to go on. And then we've got a skirmish with the Houthis, right? So there's a whole bunch of flags there. Is this a full war? No, but it's not. It is an outcropping of the war with Gaza, but it's one that we're involved with, where we are shooting at things every day, and they keep taking a shot at us. And underneath all of this in the Middle East, of course, are more U.S. military members than you realize, to include my youngest son, who is a first lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps, who's sitting in Baghdad. And luckily, he hasn't been attacked the past 2 weeks, so that's all good. Let's talk about Ukraine for a second. So my theory, my hypothesis is that the realities of modern warfare have completely turned our view of what war is like on its head. Because for the past 20 years, our view of war has been lightning action, large formations, maneuvering, tearing through the enemy, deciding things relatively quickly. So you guys have heard of the 100-hour war, the first first Gulf War. It really wasn't 100 hours. That was the Army PR campaign. The war was 6 weeks long, and that was the air campaign prior to the 100 hours of ground combat. And then in 2003, we took Baghdad with essentially a division. So that's not a lot of people, for those of you that are not familiar with the military, but we were able to crush the Iraqi resistance relatively quickly, and within 3 weeks we had taken the government and taken the capital. Of course, we didn't know the years that would come afterwards. But that's our thought process on modern war. And this was our thought process on what was going to happen in Ukraine. We all thought that within 5 days the Russians would probably take Kyiv, get rid of the government, and there'd be some type of negotiated end to that conflict. But it didn't happen that way. Then, a year later, we all thought that with all the new Western weapons that Ukraine has been given. And so just want to remind everybody that a year ago, the Ukrainians were sitting on top of 15 brigade sets of equipment of M1s and Bradleys and Leopard 2s and British Challengers and all these great modern Western weapons that they trained on for at least a week. And they were going to be able to roll in and cut through the Russians and retake their 2014 borders. It's 2024. That has not happened. Why has that not happened? Why did the Russians not take Ukraine out in the first 5 days like they thought? Why did the Ukrainians not push the Russians back to the border? Why is that war still stalemated? And I said stalemate, and you can quote me on it. Well, for a couple of reasons. Tactical weapons have changed things to where the defense is stronger than the offense. The Javelin anti-tank weapon, or as the Ukrainians call it, St. Javelin. It's a handheld weapon that infantry can use that can stop army. And that's how the Ukrainians blunted the initial Russian attack. And they caused untold casualties that forced the Russians to rethink how they operated. then we put the Russian cultural problems of never allowing initiative, and they got stagnated, and the attack failed, and they pulled back from their northern attack on Kyiv, and then eventually the Ukrainians were able to hit them where they ain't, and push the Russians back from Kharkiv that you see up towards this area here, which is now getting ready to be under assault again. Well, why weren't the Ukrainians then able to, a year later, with all this Western equipment, push the Russians out, push the Russians back? For the same reason. Because those defensive advantages that the Ukrainians had in stopping the Russians had in stopping the Ukrainians. The Russians dug in, they placed mines, they had artillery in positions where they could not push through the front lines. Any students of history? It is last year when I gave this speech, it was 1915. This year, it's 1916. We are facing World War I in Ukraine. That front is 600 miles long. Anybody that thinks that 32 M1 Abrams II tanks given to the Ukrainians make any difference in a war that is a front of 600 miles is not very well versed in military history. 60 F-16s, if they get all 60, initially it's going to be 24, to make a difference over the size of a country like that, it's just not studying what warfare is all about. So the Ukrainian counteroffensive fails. We don't talk a lot about it today, but it failed. Because remember, it's going to be the spring, then the summer, then the fall, and then, well, we can't do it during the winter. All that equipment has been used. All that equipment is no longer serviceable. And what do we say about it? We applaud ourselves that our Western equipment, the M2 Bradleys, the M1 Abrams, the Challengers, the Leopards, are incredibly great products because when they get hit and taken out, the crews survive, as opposed to in the Russian vehicles where the crews don't. This is all a true statement, but it doesn't change the fact that then the vehicle is no longer serviceable for combat effectiveness. So we end up in trench warfare. We are in trench warfare. The introduction of drones and mines and air defense weapon systems have changed the tactical nature of this theater of war, which we would plan to fight in a major maneuver type situation, where we punch through the enemy lines, we roll up behind them, and we would cause them to retreat or to run away or to break, hopefully. But that has not happened. At the operational level, you have two countries that are essentially both Soviet doctrine countries that don't know how to run air campaigns. And now, after 2 years of war, they have dispersed enough of their assets and lost enough of them that they can't fight an air campaign like we did in Iraq in '91. They have command and control issues where they don't talk to each other, they don't coordinate operations. So even if we were able to give 3 divisions, 60,000 people, and 1,000 tanks to the Ukrainians, they still can't operationally control those types of forces to have an operational level of effect because it's just not in their doctrine, and it'll take years to get them there. And then we get to logistics. The fuel, the bombs, the bullets, the beams, everything necessary to fight major theater war we have not experienced since the Second World War. And I'm not skipping over Korea and Vietnam or the Desert Wars. I'm saying that we haven't seen anything on this scale since then. And strategically, what that's taught us is the thing that matters the most out of all this is what mattered the most in the Second World War. The defense industrial base. In the Second World War, the United States made more aircraft carriers in 1943 than Japan had the entire war. That is a defense industrial base. Where is that defense industrial base today? In the United States, we make fighter aircraft in 2 places in the United States: Fort Worth, Texas, and St. Louis, Missouri. We don't have a defense industrial base anymore because in the 90s we didn't need it. And in the 2000s we thought we could draw it down, and just-in-time logistics, and we want to consolidate contractors and so forth. Javelin anti-tank weapons. We've given the Ukrainians 10,000 Javelin anti-tank weapons. Do you know how many we make a year in the United States? 2,000. So even for a fighter pilot history major from the Air Force Academy, I can do the math, and that says that's 5 years to replace those stocks. Can we double our output? No. You know why? Well, there's a whole host of reasons. Supply chain, workforce, all that other good stuff. But 3 letters that limit our ability to rapidly build our defense industrial base. Barbara's not going to like the answer to this one. EPA. Because we cannot do the things we need to, like we did in the Second World War, to increase our defense industrial base. There's no waivers for that. We have problems with all of our munitions factories in Alabama, in North Carolina, and in Virginia that have water, groundwater issues, all these types of issues, and our own naval ordnance now, which is home to Raytheon and BAE. There's incredible environmental issues that we have to deal with. Where we make ships in San Diego and in Norfolk, environmental issues. Could they be waived? Sure. Could we discard those environmental concerns and increase our industrial output? Absolutely. Will we? So, the first slide was 2022. This is 2024. 2 years, billions of dollars, tens of thousands of lives. And please show me the difference in the front lines. This is reality, folks. This isn't a political statement. This is not advocating for any particular policy. This is just reality. That war is stagnant. Completely stagnant. So, our next war in the discussion. So, the Gaza war. So this looks, I couldn't get the slides to scale, obviously, because if I could, it'd be irrelevant. But this, at the widest spot, is like 8 miles. And it's about 20 miles long. And it's incredibly urban. It is like, it's like fighting a war with several 100,000 people in Jefferson County. Actually, half of Jefferson County. Think about that. And we thought, of course, that the Israelis could never be surprised. Well, they got surprised, and Hamas handed them quite a nasty blow in October, targeting complete civilian targets and soft targets, and they did damage. Well, of course, the Israelis have responded, but it's been 6 months now. So why haven't the Israelis completely wiped it off the face of the earth? I mean, they're doing their best, I suppose, but. This is what they control. The blue is what they control today. Well, why? Well, because the defense is stronger than the offense. And this also puts a new thing in for everybody to deal with is how do you fight a military that is completely entwined into a civilian population? Next to them, under them, above them. What happens? How do you deal with this? Our perception as Americans of war is we can hit the right target. And that's absolutely true. I can put a bomb through a ventilation shaft. I have actually done it. It's possible. But when that ventilation shaft also goes through a hospital or goes through an apartment building to get to a bunker that's below it, there are going to be civilian casualties. And then the worst case, the worst thing that we don't realize in this room is some days you run out of those bombs and you are dropping dumb iron bombs, only slightly more precise than we dropped in the Second World War, and only because the aircraft has an aiming system that is far superior than what we had in World War II. Civilians are going to die. War is terrible. Collateral damage is going to happen. Gaza is destroyed for, decades, if it ever comes back the way that it could have been. The collateral damage is something that we just don't know how to deal with as a country and don't expect. Next war, the skirmish here in the south, Yemen. So the Houthis are a rebel movement that have taken essentially what's old, and I know it doesn't seem right, but North Yemen and South Yemen. You would think that the easternmost would be north and the other would be south, but it's not. It's reversed. But they are aligned and sponsored by Iran. They started to try and shut down the shipping lanes, which is against America. Even Senator Paul thinks that their ability to shut down the shipping lane shouldn't be allowed, right? That we should probably do something about it, which we have. We've been trying to do strikes. But the power of the United States Navy and the Royal Air Force and the other allied partners that are there, why have we not been able to take down a rebel group that, you know, quite frankly, is relatively backwards, but it's shooting anti-ship ballistic missiles and drones and cruise missiles and everything that's been supplied to them by Iran at ships in the Red Sea to try and disrupt, and they have disrupted, global commerce. Well, we can't because they are completely in civilian areas where they launch. And they're very crafty and they're war hardened because they fought a war with the Saudis for a couple of decades. And they're good at it. Plus, we don't have the assets available to do it. Because aircraft carriers, everyone's seen Top Gun, we all love the Navy, we all love aircraft carriers and so forth. But an aircraft carrier is limited in the amount of sorties it can fly. And that's a relatively big mountainous area. To control that area from the air, to suppress their ability to fire missiles, I need 100 airplanes. And I need tankers to refuel them. And I need AWACS to command and control them. I need all the bases necessary to do that. And we don't have that. So we do carrier strikes when we are able to find targets and engage. And the rest of the time, we engage their weapons. So this is where defense works for us. Because as they shoot these weapons at our ships and at international ships, we're able to shoot them down, mostly. Which we also saw when the Iranians fired at Israel a couple of weeks ago. The power of the defense in that case. This is where we have forces. So you think we could put 100 airplanes there? We could. But the problem is that the Arab countries that we are allied with, Oman, the Saudis, UAE, they don't want any part of this any longer because they've done it long enough. So we're not basing land-based air out there. And they're worried about the Iranians. So the Houthis are able to continue to engage. So we fly from aircraft carriers. And some unmanned stuff from Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. And what's the result? All those red spots are places that U.S. forces have been attacked in Syria and Iraq by Shia-based militias that are sponsored by Iran. Interestingly enough, though, after we did respond to the Iranians finally, and we did a strike 2 months ago or whatever, the attacks did come down because the Iranians have a problem. You know, everybody here, everybody's in business here, you have succession problems, right? Who's going to take over for you when you're gone? You don't know how it's going to work. The Iranians have the same issue. When you kill senior Iranian leaders, the Iranians have a tough time backfilling because they don't trust the people that they have below them. So there is some validity in decapitation strikes against Iranian military. So that's the world environment. Who have we been, right, as actors on the world stage? In the Cold War, the world was bipolar, right? We're schizophrenic today. No, we're bipolar powers, the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. We had peer competitors. And in that environment, we were very cautious as a superpower. Russia and the United States got through the Cuban Missile Crisis because we were both very cautious in how we did that. The end of history in the 90s, unipolar. We were the biggest, baddest cat on the planet. We were unmatched by anyone. We went where we wanted, how we wanted, as long as we wanted. And we were the world protector. Not the world invader, but we were the world protector. We chose when to protect and when not. We got attacked on 9/11, we all remember that. Still a unipolar world, peers are starting to increase a bit, but we were mad. The enraged Avenger. We went everywhere, all the time. Post 9/11, post 9/11, the world has grown up. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, India. Not necessarily enemies, but starting to become peers militarily and diplomatically, which ultimately is the strongest form of power. But we don't know who we're going to be yet. Who will we be tomorrow? We just don't know that. Well, tomorrow's here. Tomorrow is here, because tomorrow is the Russia-Ukrainian war, and the Gaza war, and the skirmish with the Houthis, and God forbid a war with China. China doesn't have to be an enemy, by the way. We don't have to make them an enemy. They're going to be a competitor, but we don't have to talk them into being an enemy. What are our lessons militarily, right? Conventional war is highly lethal. The offense is no longer stronger. Collateral damage and civilian casualties are inevitable. Inevitable. We cannot fight the way we fought in '91 in a major peer competition. Urban warfare is draining. It is a resource loss. Logistical challenges are far greater than we anticipated. Every war plan the United States has is wrong. We need to multiply what we need to fight those wars by at least a factor of 3. And it's not available currently. Western industry isn't ready for global war. We're not. Are we buying bonds today? Are we all saying we will not buy a new vehicle for the next 2 years because all the supplies necessary for cars need to go to military production? Are we suspending air travel because is this really the right time to take that trip? Are we doing anything along those lines to do the rapid increase in defense industrial base that we would need to fight major theater war? No. Interestingly enough, for all the communications people in the room, the strongest form of warfare is the narrative. No one's going to win in Ukraine. The Russians aren't going to take Kyiv. The Ukrainians aren't taking Moscow. But somebody will convince each other that they've won the war. And will convince their public that they've won the war. And the war will end with a negotiated settlement, hopefully. Wars of decision, taking the enemy's capital, raising their flag, are not likely any longer. If the United States and China get in a war over Taiwan, will the Chinese raise the flag over Washington? Will we raise the flag over Beijing? There is no chance of that. The world would be gone before that happened. Again, I didn't say I was coming with good news, but I'm coming with reality. So if tomorrow, another tomorrow comes, who do we need to be? We need to be restrained realists. It's not comfortable. It's not comfortable. Because occasionally we're going to have to look at situations like Ukraine and go, you know what? End the war. We're going to have to look at Israeli allies and go, we get it, but stop. And we're going to have to make decisions for our own when we become engaged and when we don't. The cost of aggressive behavior is staggering. If I really wanted to hurt the United States, if we give more weapons to the Ukrainians, the Russians say, okay, that's it. We're going to do a limited strike on the United States. You know what targets I would hit? I wouldn't go for the big, wipe out all the nuclear missiles and all that kind of stuff. All you got to do is cut key communications nodes and key lines of transport in the United States to bring our economy and country to, an abrupt halt. And guess where one of those key targets would be? Right here. Because of all those beautiful bridges we've built over the Ohio, including the ones that we pay tolls for. They take that out. What does that do to our transportation across the country? Bridges across the Mississippi. So for the small cost of maybe 5 million people, the Russians could bring the country to its needs. Would we respond? Sure, but then we negotiate a settlement. It doesn't matter to us at that point in time. Fort Knox, home of 5th Corps headquarters, in a major war in Europe, should we become involved, that will be the headquarters that will fight the ground element of the war. They will go forward to oppose in Poland, to their forward headquarters, and they will run it from there. Of course that's a Russian target. Of course. So, does this matter to us? Of course it does. Does it matter to us? What'd you pay for gas today on the way here? Or do you drive an electric? Gil's driving an electric, I know. So, yeah. Okay, what'd you pay at Kroger? Yeah, that's yeah. Anyway, Americans don't realize what's at stake. We just don't, because for the past 20 years we don't. And we have people in Congress right now that advocate, we gotta be tough on China, we gotta do X, Y, and Z. Great. Understand what that means. If we as a people understand it and agree to it, then by all means, let's roll. But if we don't realize that any war with Iran, will bring kinetic effects to the United States, to the continental United States, then you're dreaming. Not a political statement, but I guarantee you, if I was the head of the Quds Force, if all my agents in Latin America had not walked across that border and dispersed themselves across the United States, I'd fire every one of them. And then the last thing that we just don't think about as Americans anymore is victory is not guaranteed. It is not guaranteed. When we entered World War II, victory was not guaranteed for us, and we fought like it. Any future war that we enter in, victory is not guaranteed because smaller countries can bet way above their weight these days. Cyber attack, nanotechnologies, unmanned technologies, all kinds of things that can bring our way of life to its knees. How many of you use GPS to get here today? Right? Guess what? First target. First target. So I don't give you good news, and I apologize for that, but my hope is this. There are ways out of this, but we have to come together as a country to do it. And the first thing we have to do is hold those who make these decisions accountable to seriously think about these decisions, right? Spend the intellectual time necessary. Don't automatically think, oh, well, we can be tough because I need to look tough for my re-election or my campaign or whatever. Because these are critical issues, just like they were before, that we forgot. We took a 20-year break on the importance of foreign policy because we didn't have to worry about it. When you have all the money in the world, right, at home, you don't care what something costs as much because you don't have to. Well, we have to now. So, keep your elected officials engaged, stay engaged in foreign policy issues. And let's all come together to find a way to restore the United States to its true premier power, which is diplomatic and cultural, to where we become the example to the rest of the world on how we should live and how we should proceed, and people respect us and want to be like us as opposed to afraid of whatever it is that we're going to do. Thank you. I think we have time for a couple of questions. You can ask any question that you want. I mean, I guess within your own guidelines, but I mean, if I don't answer it, I'll just let Neville take it. And
yes, I have a question.
yes, sir.
My name is Larry Sloan, and I had a son who fought in the Gulf War and was wounded. But so your story, your whole theme seems to be that of David and Goliath. You've got small countries attacking big countries. You've got Achilles heels everywhere that you've shown us. So it's kind of scary.
Speak up, please.
I'm sorry. My question is, can a drone take out a huge aircraft carrier?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So aircraft carriers. I mean, I love them, right? But drones, anti-ship ballistic missiles. I mean, we have defenses for all of that stuff. But there is a chance that that stuff gets through. And if we lose an aircraft carrier, that's 5,000 Americans. I mean, fast. We only lost 3,000 in the attack on the World Trade Centers. Modern warfare is lethal, very lethal. And we cannot guarantee, and we need to be prepared for that should we get into a conflict. And so I always get nervous when people take biblical references, David and Goliath, and Greek references, Achilles' heels, and putting them together. I'm just trying, oh wow! Make my Catholic brain hurt. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Rob, wonderful presentation, and thank you for your service, militarily and politically. It really is, it's heartening to see you in your roles. I don't think your analysis of the United States not being, it's clear that the military-industrial complex is not ready to produce the means necessary. But it wasn't either in 1941. Okay, so it took a strike to Pearl Harbor, and then total war was achieved, or total output was achieved. So I don't know if that's a fair expectation until that happens, or if it happens. You know what I'm getting at? I mean, I think the analysis is accurate, but why would we? Because we haven't been attacked like Pearl Harbor.
Well, allow me to retort. Actually, you make a very compelling argument. However, it is incorrect. Neville and I know each other pretty well. So the Defense Production Act in 1940, right? President Roosevelt saw the handwriting on the wall, and we started the draft in 1940. We started retooling. We started going into all kinds of limitations and things. So, and we actually had this argument amongst the military leadership and the political leadership because as people wanted to send more weapons to Great Britain to keep them in the war, the military said, we can't do that, because if we do, we're going to take away from our ability to fight, and we are way behind. And so we were fortunate that Roosevelt was far-sighted enough to start doing things like starting the draft. If we drafted today, right? So, Gil, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you because I know you're into real estate development, but where would we start training the 2 million soldiers we would need to train? Those bases don't exist anymore. We would have to come to you and say, could we please, rent some of your property, and how's this all going to work? So if you're in the property business and that happens, you guys are going to be in. It'll be great. We'll print more money to hand to you. So we did, but you're right. It took the attack to get the American public behind the thought and eliminate any of those that wanted to stay out of the war piece. Yes.
Well, again, so yeah, fine. But getting the buildup, I mean, Germany had invaded Poland, and Hitler came to power.
Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yes.
Putin's Hitler, right?
Yeah, it's
2 years ago. 2 years ago. So it's 1941. That was 1939. 2 years, 41. Your point is, when is it time to do that? And the question is that the more adventurous we are foreign policy-wise, the time is closer and closer that we need to do that. If we decide we're not going to be foreign policy adventurous, well, then maybe we don't. Maybe we can still drive forwards.
Cliff Elgin is, not to recap all of them, but these conflicts all around the world, as I look at the big picture, all of them put together benefit one country, China. So I'd like your thoughts on that.
I'm trying to think. All of these conflicts only benefit those that seek to take advantage of the disruption that's caused by the conflicts. But the thing that's different about the Chinese is the Chinese want one thing more than anything: stability. The Chinese pressured us in North Korea. Anytime the North Koreans act out, the Chinese don't go to the North Koreans and pressure them. They pressure us. And they pressure us because we're the rational actor. They just want, look, we want peace in the neighborhood. Peace in the neighborhood. So the Chinese they walk a fine tightrope on this. I'm not a huge fan of communist China. And communist is also kind of a ridiculous thing because it's state-controlled capitalism. They're capitalists all over in Beijing. You can buy Porsches and Ferraris and all kinds of great stuff. You can only drive it every other day, though, because the government doesn't like to drive every day. No, don't get any ideas about that, though. It's not, Barbara, it's not good policy, all right? So are the Chinese taking advantage of this? Yes. What's their end goal? They would like to be more of a world leader, and they just want global stability in their view. I don't think they're instigating the conflicts. I think the conflict with Hamas and Israel is instigated by bad policy on both sides, fueled by Iran. I think the war against Ukraine, Russia is fueled by the strongman that, sorry folks, we helped create the conditions for him to take power in that country, because from 1992 till he took power in 2000, we did the worst thing ever we could to the Russians. We ignored them. They were a world power and we ignored them. Sorry, I guess I didn't turn my phone on. It's a staff member, it's okay. He's got a court case.
Mike Mullen.
Yeah.
All right, I'm a banker and also a historian. And so one of the things that allowed us to win World War II is our ability to have a strong economy. And our national debt to GDP was extremely low compared to where it is today. From an economic position, how do you view the United States and our ability to defend the world?
I wanted to start by saying we did not plant this man in the audience, right? I am not an economist. I am not. But that is a great question. And now that is something where I will say my boss will tell you, and this is one of the reasons why he voted, no on the package, right? And no one's asked that question yet. But it's our debt is staggering, and the amount of money that we have produced is staggering. And at what point in time does that break the economy? Anybody bought a new house lately? I mean, Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, a little late. It was really good about 10 years ago. Awesome, actually even later, sooner than that. Flooding the economy with cash that doesn't really exist and creating debt. I'm not an economist, but does not seem like a great idea. And when you take a look at the Reagan buildup, so let's assume that we've gone through that Iraq and Afghanistan were this, millennium's Vietnam. I mean, I know it's a gross, comparison. But as far as national spirit and national treasure and all that stuff, and then we know we're divided as a country. We're divided in our city. I mean, we're divided. Things are just not great. If we were looking for that turnaround and the retooling of defense industry and so forth, of the Reagan era, take a look, because we spent a significantly larger portion of our gross national product on military under Reagan than we did ever. I guess we incurred the debt. But take a look at how much debt we had then. The GDP, the ratio was so much smaller. We can't do that. We can't. We have to figure out a way. There are problems we have to solve financially. And I'm looking around the room and I'm putting myself in the same category. This whole Social Security thing, we kind of got to solve that, right? Medicare, we kind of got to solve that. Discretionary spending versus non-discretionary spending, we have to solve those issues. And it's going to take tough choices. And we don't see people willing to take tough choices much anymore, So, how's it for a banker? Actually, you should be just raking it in at the moment. But it's a problem, right? A sound economy. Now, granted, we came in World War II, right? We started from the Depression. Government spent our way kind of out of that to a degree. The war happened and things exploded, and we were the only country that didn't have its entire industrial base destroyed in the war. Today, I don't know how we retool at that level, or if it's even possible.
You mentioned one thing about the diplomacy, and I think it's 8.8%, less than 1% of GDP on, actually of the federal spending is on diplomacy, State Department, and all non-military aid. And you're former chair of the World Affairs Committee. Give me your thoughts on if we should do a little more in that area.
My theory is we should just do a little less of the other. Should we spend more on State Department? You guys ever worked with the State Department much? Any former ambassadors here? Yeah. So we had a family. We had a family that had a group of students from Corbin, Somerset, Kentucky, that were stuck in Honduras. And so they called, and they were asking for help. So we go through the 1-800 number for U.S. citizens abroad that are stuck, whatever. And this is the response that I got. So I finally got to the Foreign Service officer in the embassy at Tegucigalpa. It's a weekend, I know, it's crazy, it's a Sunday, but one of the students is diabetic, is running out of insulin, and they just need help. And obviously, this is a group that hadn't spent a lot of time overseas, or they wouldn't realize it wasn't as big of a crisis as they thought. But so I'm talking to the staffer at the State Department, and this is what I got on the phone. I said, "Hey, can you help them?" Whatever. Well, we've already heard about it, but they can just show up here on Tuesday when we open up again. Okay, great, but can you do anything from now? And then this was the response. I'm just a random staffer that has the phone this weekend. Okay, to which I just laughed, actually. I don't go old negative military much anymore, just on my staff, not on and I just said, see, your embassy has done you a great disservice, because if you're the watch officer for the weekend, you should have some clue of what to do. I don't need a robotic answering machine saying, please leave a message for an American in crisis, right? It doesn't make me feel any better talking to a human that's going to tell me the same thing that an AI bot would have done. The State Department's got to up its game. It's got to up its game, but ultimately, the people that really have to up their game on it, regardless of the party, is the executive branch in the leadership in trying to wield American diplomatic power, but understanding that sometimes that means we're not going to get everything we want. Secretary Blinken is in China threatening China today. Because the Chinese are going, oh, well, we weren't going to do that until you threatened us. How do we go about building? We should look at China right now and say, how do we together end the war in Ukraine? We both have an interest in it being over. How do we end it? These are the things that the State Department needs to do, that we need to as diplomats. I don't think we need to spend money on that. We just have to spend more intellectual capital. And quoting Winston Churchill, gentlemen, we're all out of money. It's time to think.
That was great. Interesting. And things are going to be easy, right? Somebody tell us?
What?
Everything will be easy, so we Frank knows.
Yeah, well, it's Derby week.
There's no regular meeting next Thursday, because Wednesday we have that Rotary of the Downs. If you haven't picked up your tickets, Delaney's got it, but they used to be digital, now they're going to be physical tickets for next Wednesday, so make sure you pick those up. The following Thursday, May 9th, we're actually not going to be here, we're going to be at the Goodwill Industries new headquarters, which is really nice. And that's 28th and Broadway. But lunch is going to be catered by Shantez James. She's the owner of Real Potatoes LLC. She's actually the first person who was a first-time homeowner who got a mortgage through the West Louisville Housing Initiative. That's a great lady. So please go and help us celebrate the students. We have been mentoring since Western and Iroquois High School, as well as Interact Club members. Thank you all for that. And the Bellevue University basketball, men's basketball coach, who many of you have heard before, is speaking at that lunch as well. And Scotty Davenport, speaking of the program on May 9th, 2 weeks from today. And then May 16th, we're going to hear from Secretary Lindy Cansby, a former Rotarian, Kentucky Tourism, head of the Cabinet, Arts and Heritage Cabinet. Thanks for a great meeting.